Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Thanks for joining. Today, we are very excited to sit down and spend some time with Todd Harrison from CB1 Capital Management and spend some time talking through the good, the bad, the ugly, what is going on in the world of U.S. cannabis. It's been an interesting end to the last year with finalizing the, finally getting the Trump executive order on rescheduling for cannabis. But as we head into 2026 in more depth, it'll be interesting to kind of get a sense of where we are, where the players are, and all of that. So if you're out there and joining and you have questions, of course, you're always welcome to put them in the chat. I already see somebody in the chat saying hi, which is great. You're also welcome to do that, of course. But with all that said, Todd, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. I know it has been a busy start to the year. How is January ultimately panning out for you so far?
It's hurry up and wait, much like it was, for the executive order, but this time we're waiting for the final rule. We still think it's, sooner rather than later, but that's outside our scope of view. There's chatter, making the rounds that Bondi's in trouble or this or that, but I don't know from that. I just know that, what this president wants, this president, tends to get, and this was teed up for him. So everything we thought was going to happen last year happened. We think 2026 will be a positive year for, the good companies. I don't think anything, from a federal standpoint is going to really, change a bad business into a good business, but it could change a good business into a great business, particularly as the halo effect starts to manifest. And we've been standing in a circle for 6 years, staring at each other, and the ability to take a 180-degree turn and look out at these other CPG companies or new investors, or we've talked about the three amigos that we need for the new cannabis bull, and why we think each of them is in play, but we can go through that again if there's new viewers, or it's really up to you. But we think there's a lot to look forward to. I think we just got to navigate the world, and we got to navigate the structural machination of cannabis, as we saw on December 18th. It's easily pushed around. We need new investors. We need, something to get people comfortable that this time is different, as opposed to, we saw, Biden try to, do this and nothing happened. So there's still a lot of skepticism, but I don't think, if we see a final rule, I don't think it's going to be, the same type of reaction that we saw on December 18th, because I think the knock-on effect, both across the states and across the federal government, will be real, despite the fact that we're going to get lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera.
Of course. But ultimately, it sounds like tracks are still laid. Things are, moving ahead. Of course, everyone is unsure on timing. I think that has been definitely talked about almost to death, so I don't want to keep covering it. But it seems like things are still looking relatively on track, which is great to hear.
Yep.
I'd love to hear just sort of, I know there's been a lot going on in the macro unrelated to cannabis, just generally in terms of kind of the noise and the activity we've seen outside of what's been going on domestically. How much do you think that kind of comes into play? What's your level of, not worry, but level of how much this could delay things versus is cannabis something that is easily pushed through and it's sort of a totally separate thing?
Yeah, I mean, the world's fucked up. I don't think anybody needs to, you don't need a geopolitical degree to say that, but I don't think that, Trump, you saw it, I think it was yesterday or today, he highlighted cannabis as one of his accomplishments. This is exactly what I think we talked about last year, how he wants this under his belt for the midterms, how he's lost the crypto crowd for the most part anyway. I haven't looked at crypto today, but so he needs to energize the youth vote, and I think cannabis is a way to keep, the youth vote in play. But we're expecting, the same people who told us what to expect last year, and everything kind of proved exactly as they said, or constructive, and even if not more so, heading into the midterm. So we feel like there's a lot more coming. We talked about, just to say it again, the three amigos, which is growth, the new states, and the end of the intoxicating hemp loophole. You should facilitate that. And I'll say it again, over the last 5 or 10 years, the growth and normalization of THC has been absolutely gangbusters. It's just been bifurcated into two channels. So as one of those channels goes away, presumably, yes, we'll still have to compete with the illicit market, but the demand curve should improve even if prices continue to normalize. That's always been the expectation: higher volume, lower prices, and and the winners emerge. So I think that growth is on tap, and you can see through to that growth. The second is regulatory clarity, or excuse me, regulatory parity, which what a final rule should help facilitate, not only from the onerous 280E tax standpoint, but from a uplisting and custody standpoint, and cost of capital standpoint, and credit card standpoint, and all that jazz. We think on the other side of Schedule 3, obviously, there's a lot of consternation regarding both the timing and the substance. But those who are closest, who are the biggest cannabis companies out there, are quite excited about what's to come. And then that third piece is that tax clarity, and we continue to hear of an ongoing settlement discussion that's coming from one of the big players in the space, but not done until it's done. Another fellow who I talked to about that, had said to me, he feels like 2023 onwards, they're fine after the HHS ruling, but before that could get sticky. We also have the statute of limitations, kicking in, which I think is 5 years, I think. Don't quote me on that, but regardless, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I think, on the tax stuff, whether that's the final rule stopping it going forward, and then clarity on how to clean up the uncertain tax provisions. I don't know that sequence, but I do feel like all three of our amigos are in play this year. And I don't even speak Spanish. So
There you go. That sounds good. Yeah, no, good to kind of refresh on those things, and definitely interesting. I think the conversation a little bit around intoxicating hemp, and does that get pushed out in terms of getting an extension for, I think it was 2 years or not. I think that's kind of died down, but I would imagine with seeing moves like from Curaleaf and just sort of generally kind of pulling away from the hemp side of things, that might be a sign that that's not going to get extended. Did you have any thoughts kind of based on what you're seeing from that perspective?
Where you stand is a function of where you sit.
Yeah, sure.
We talked to some hemp beverage players who are convinced that there's going to be either a extension or carve out. But when I talk to other lobbyists and players who are close, who are not hemp per se, they've said to me, like, this was the worst kept secret in Washington. Like, lawmakers wanted to get this out of their states, and it needs to be regulated, and hence the the rule. And I don't know if, or I should say the law that was passed, but I don't know if Andy Harris and Mitch McConnell are going to allow for an extension, right? It's sort of like, if I don't know. And I think there should be, a hemp beverage, or excuse me, a low dose THC beverage market. It saved me from alcohol for the last 3 or 4 years. I actually switched over from Tempters to the Iverson line, because their Iverson line, which I think Bubba Chuck, which is one of the three flavors, is number one. I think it's Circle K in the Southeast region, or wherever they rolled it out. But the appetite for these drinks is fantastic. I think it's 5 calories, and it's changed my my health, my entire health, and my mental health, for not drinking, and the depressant that alcohol is, the poison that it is. And I'm not saying, that this is the way that everybody should go, but I do feel like I'm not alone in the Cali sober movement. I just don't take to alcohol anymore. Not just, I had a cold beer on vacation on a hot day, like, that was pretty much it. And I had a glass of wine, half a glass of wine one night at dinner, and just to see if I missed it, and I didn't. So, I think that there will be, I hope that there will be a solution regarding the beverage side of the equation, but I'm suspect that we're going to see an extension writ large across the categories, right? It may narrow down to low dose, etc. I don't know, but I do think, listen, if these chains under Schedule 3, the Circle K's of the world, the Specs, the Total Wine and Spirit, if they're comfortable, or if they want to continue, I should say, carrying these drinks, then certainly the we're just talking about swapping out the supply chain in the states where there's, legal cannabis. So we'll see. That's the one unknown, right? But I do, when you look at the other side and you're like, okay, well, Glass House is a potential solution for hemp in the CBD Medicare thing, which is supposed to, again, start Q2. And I have a hard time seeing that promise being kept to Howard Kessler unless we have Schedule 3 and banking in place by then, right? I don't know if we do, but I have a hard time seeing that whole thing, taking off without that. Yeah, so you have Glass House. You've seen the move in Charlotte's Web, but I feel like Glass House is probably the better play, just because they have, it's a low cost cultivation and what Graham is building out there. I just feel like, that's probably the safer play. I don't know enough about Charlotte's, their cash needs, if they're going to do a raise. I see it flagging on the chart, but it's also it was 9 cents in December, and it's now 35 cents. So I do think I think it's the first. It's a very good step. It is rescheduling. I do think in the back half of this, of the Trump administration post midterms, you're going to see a push for the state's 2.0 Act, but Schedule 3 in and of itself, the halo effect that it will create for Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, and the 26 other states tied to the CSA, coupled with the hemp ban, you can make the case for growth. We need to fix the machination, obviously, because it's just a recipe for manipulation, unfortunately, in its current state, with a lot of the institutions being sort of stuck on the outside looking in, right, with the custody stuff. I think as that changes, the DNA of our space will change as well.
Yeah, I think well said in terms of where we are in the macro and kind of, where we are in this moment ultimately. I do want to dig a little bit more into kind of companies. I know we're not quite on the edge of earnings, but we're going to start getting into that. So just kind of digging a little bit into the companies themselves. But I am seeing a comment. I know we're talking about midterms and I think cannabis being popular, but you did mention, I think it was the 365, pieces that Trump had said he'd accomplish and things like that. I'm seeing a comment talking about how Biden had also touted cannabis reform early. Are you worried about those parallels there? Do you see them as parallels, or do you see that as sort of him thinking it is on the path to being a done thing, and so he's sort of counting it early? What's your kind of take there? Because I understand kind of both sides on that front.
You're talking about rescheduling?
Yeah, him saying rescheduling it.
Yeah, I mean, promises made, promises kept. He didn't do it just to, I don't think this is anything like, Biden and Garland. I think this is going to happen. I do think it's going to happen sooner or later. I don't know about the chatter with Bondi, or why it didn't happen before January expiration like we were all hoping. But it is January 21st. We're 3 weeks into 2026. So I think it's a little early to be, putting a toe tag on the president's executive order. He said, yes, there'll be a law of the land within 30 days, but he also said actually, as soon as it's legally viable. Right. So they may be dotting I's and crossing T's. I don't know. I was under the impression it was already done. But I don't know where it is, but I do believe it's coming. And I think when it comes, it's going to, at least offer, some positivity to the space, because that is the unlock, right? And I don't think people are going to realize that until they see the first, M&A or CPG or uplisting. We're told Bessent's on board. We know Trump isn't happy with the U.S. listing in Canada and Canada listing in U.S. So a Trump truth wouldn't shock me either. But we're all waiting on the final rule so we could say goodbye to those 3 numbers in the letter that we all hate so much, right? And then we go from there.
Yes.
So looking forward to that. It's been a long haul. There's been people who have really, spent a lot of money and a lot of time and are still waiting for this for their businesses. So, as an investor, we're frustrated. As a business owner, who's just paid a lot of money to, try to move this through, you're, sort of doubly frustrated. But, we're talking about, I think, in the context of a 50+ year prohibition, this is this is meaningful. So I don't think it's going to be the same reaction as we saw with the final rule, although the conditional elements are still in place until institutions come in. So we got to fix the plumbing before there can be any real liquidity. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess.
That makes sense. Well, so I feel like coming into the close of 2025, or even midway through, I feel like had heard a lot of confidence from a lot of the leaders in the cannabis companies, saying that they thought this would happen and go through. And obviously, we've seen an important first step on that with the executive order being issued. In terms of talking with these leaders and kind of getting a temperature check on where things are with them. Obviously, you can't you can anonymize it in some way, but has there been any shifts in terms of tone, in terms of talking about it at all, or is it all the same?
It's been the same. I mean, if there is, I'm just looking if I missed any messages. No, I mean, I asked, I had heard this morning that there's some chatter about Bondi being off sides or something. And I was like, I just asked my people, and I didn't get any response yet. But, when I checked in with them last week, it wasn't, the question was whether we were going to possibly get it before Friday. And the reaction was, I don't, it's quite possible, but one person who's pretty plugged in said, I still think it's towards the end of the month. I don't know if that's right or not. And I don't know what happens between now and then, as we've discussed. So, I don't know. The answer is no. Nothing has changed in terms of my expectations, and or at least what I've been told in terms of timing of a final rule.
Okay, that's important to hear. I just feel like those are the people who are most in touch with where things are headed. So just
Which
curious.
doesn't mean it hasn't changed. It just means that I haven't gotten the memo.
That's okay. Fair enough. That is true. Don't want to overpromise. All right, let's see. JH is saying a lot of it's dirty weed. California revealed that over half of legal smoking products contain toxic pesticides. That's interesting. Not currently monitored by state authorities. I feel like I have not seen that specific report, but I do know. I feel like that is with regulation normally comes cleaner, better products. I think that is something that we move towards, also with probably a better budget, maybe relief from the 280E side of things. You're also moving into better.
Yeah, I haven't heard that, but I do think, we're going to get to a place where the testing is going to catch up with the product. But I had not heard that. I had not seen that report. So I don't have a thought on it.
I also have not seen the report, but I think the goal for everyone, a shared goal, is definitely having healthy product that is clean, safe, tested, all those things. So I think ultimately that's where we're all hopefully moving towards in the end. All right. So I did want to just check on, I know, again, we're not quite coming up on earnings yet. I think High Tide was the only one that has announced it coming towards the end of this month. But I know we're going to start heading in soon. Out of curiosity, in terms of like the spread, the lay of the land of the players in the space right now, is there anything that you're seeing that is very exciting, that is sort of giving you a extra kind of boost? Anything that you have an eye on, paying attention to, or is it sort of the same as it has been in past quarters this year versus previous?
I mean, the reaction to the Curaleaf news wasn't great, but it's not like fundamentals have mattered in our space for some time. I mean, just look at C21 and what they're doing and how they're trading involved on the board there. But the numbers speak for themselves. Curaleaf, the reaction to that news, nobody cares about fundamentals. This is a referendum on federal reform until we get institutions in here that are actually going to do the number, look at the numbers and do the work. And I think they're going to find like a handful of companies that are investable and a number of them that, aren't. So there's still a lot of, dead man walking out there. But there's also, the Terrasens and the Veranos that are working, right? And I mean, the obvious, names like the, considered the big names where institutions will, probably come first because they're the biggest names, whether that's the GTIs and True Leaves and Curas and I would say Verano and Cresco too, but they're trading at levels where I think they're going to give you a lot of torque, but not a lot of some of the institutions that I've spoken with had said we need the stocks higher before we can get involved, and we need more volumes, right? So I don't know is the answer in terms of if this earnings period will be different, because it really depends on who the audience is. If it's status quo, it's going to be the echo chamber, and it's going to, I think, just be, another exercise of going through, and looking for the handful of analysts and so forth. But I think after we get rescheduling, I think you're going to see a lot more coverage of the space, and it may take an M&A deal, it may take a beverage deal, it may take a banking, solution, a treasury memo. It could be that's IRS settlement. There's a lot of things that we're waiting on. So I don't know when those hit, but if I assume that a lot more people will be paying attention to earnings if we have a final rule in place by then.
Yep, that's true. I will say I think it is encouraging just from following the end of last year and even holidays like 420 and all of Green Wednesday, all of that. I think there's been much more an uptick in kind of major coverage again, which I think is encouraging. Obviously, like you're saying, it does require sort of more in the space to continue to grow, continue to mature, to kind of clear this rescheduling hurdle to really take advantage of that in a really meaningful way. But I think it is encouraging, I think, to see that attention and dissemination of information. And hopefully we see that too on the other side of rescheduling as well. All right. Well, then I feel like as people are just sort of riding in the space, and I guess you're also, obviously doing the same thing as well. Is it just this wait and see? Is there anything that they can be paying attention to, kind of keeping an eye on that would help them kind of navigate through? I know there's been rumors of timeframes thrown out, but that's nothing new. Kind of how should people be thinking about, navigating through this time ahead of rescheduling?
Yeah, I think where you stand is a function of where you sit. I think, if you're a trader, you're looking at this differently than if you're an investor. If you hold individual stocks versus the ETF versus options on the ETF, you're looking at this differently. I don't know the rate and pace of the re-rate. That came out weird, but I don't know how quickly these stocks re-rate on reschedule on the final rule. But I do think that, after the final rule is going to be, the rate and pace of news is going to help dictate the 2026 forward path for our space, because if it does provide that unlock, that halo effect, that, the knock-on effect for Pennsylvania, for Florida, for Texas or the other states, or you see safe banking, start to pick up because it's not a Schedule I drug anymore, which is consistent with what we heard, even though Bernie Moreno said it wasn't a priority yesterday. May not be a priority as a Schedule I as opposed to a Schedule III. And again, it may not take Congress. Custody and listing is not a law; it's a compliance effort. So if you get a Trump truth, geared to the exchanges or geared to the banks about U.S. cannabis, that could be enough, right? Or a Treasury memo, something to that effect. So it may not need Congress for this. But it remains to be seen, after we get the final rule. A lot's going to depend on, we've heard for years that, everyone's waiting on this, right? So the executive order obviously wasn't the unlock, because that was exit liquidity for people. And we talked about this last week. There was some fuckery going on. But the bottom line is, like, the structural machination is going to be broken until we have all the players on the field and all the participants in the market. So we need that, right? We need 280E clarity, which we'll get with the final rule. We need the knock-on effect in terms of the banking and the rest of the structural dynamics, which we do think will fall in line. And then we need tax clarity. So the rate and pace of that, I think, will color, the mood around earnings. I just don't know what the rate and pace of that is.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's fair. Yeah. I definitely think around any major change or any major event, I think in the world of cannabis, like the executive order, you do see those extreme run-ups, you do see those extreme rundowns. Again, hopefully over time, as the space matures, you see a little bit of a dampening of that volatility, but definitely hard to, pick exactly the moment when things are riding up or down. These names obviously are volatile, just to restate it, of course. But again, hopefully in seeing that over the long term, we see kind of the promise of the theme kind of come through ultimately. See El Guapo, which is great. Yes, extending the executive order. Also good to see you. We're classifying marijuana Schedule III, accelerating medical research and patient access. Again, yeah, that is true. In terms of where people can kind of stay in touch with, speaking of kind of El Guapo and Dale's report, I think I'd seen Anthony Varel put out an article on your Cannabis Confidential. Any sort of plugs there in terms of
Yeah, so I think I said this last week. Took a much needed editorial shift for Cannabis Confidential. Where I mean, I'm tired of myself. I'm tired of writing about the markets, and these dynamics every day, and it's not about me. So what I wanted to do was a lot like what we did at Minionville, which is a former media property that I owned, where we're going to have, mimic a players tribune for sports, where you have insiders talking about what's happening inside the market. If you're a CEO, or if you're a C-level executive, or if you're, somebody who has a good read on what's going on. The editorial mandate's pretty simple. It's honesty, trust, and respect. It's don't sell your shit, no shilling, and it's make it interesting, right? So we've got some great, folks like Hirsch, Jane, and I know Scott Grossman's talking. I'm talking to him as well. Anthony Varel and Dales, we talked about. Prohibition Partners, they're going to be covering some international stuff, which I think is pretty cool. And we have just put out invites to the CEOs. So like if you have something to say, or if you see something that's important, now you have a brand safe platform where you can, contribute with under your own byline, and, build a community that's not toxic or, filled with animus. So I don't, I don't want, I want good quality information available for people, and I want it to be free, because that's how we're going to reach the most people. And I just, I think the integrity of your partners, your reflection of the company you keep. So it's been very selective in terms of the first round reach outs to, CEOs, into, I would say, 5, like Bruce and Sammy. Like I said, I'd love for you guys to write something and tell me, what you're seeing and why, right? And I say to some of the other CEOs, like, my goal in doing this is that when people look at your stock, they don't see a symbol, they see you, right? They see the people behind the brands and the efforts, and there's a connection, right? Because you see and you understand who they are and what they're doing and why they're doing it, what makes them different, whatever it is, right? So we just, it's taken a lot of pressure off of me to have to try to, vomit up, something, behind a paywall. And I'm like, this is not the vision. The vision here is to build the community of, trusted voices, and try to help people navigate what's been a 6-year bear market and a very rough time. So the timing, I think, is right. Just it just feels right, right? Like I always tell my daughters and my kids, like, when you make a right decision, because you'll feel it, right? And you'll know when your, anxiety is really, just the friction between where you are and where you should be. So when you make the right decision and that friction disappears, that anxiety sort of dissipates. And I'll tell you, the feedback and response from people on the street and from the C-level and from, potential sponsors has been really nice. But it's not about, monetizing this as much as building the voice and in the syndication, working with Javi over at High Times and giving him, when there's something that, could be syndicated. Just trying to do things the right way with the right people at the right time.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah, I think there's still very much a desire to understand kind of how different people are seeing where we're headed from a macro perspective, but also even as, kind of as things change on a state level, on a company level, all those things. I'd seen the post about Virginia. So I think there's a big hunger for kind of understanding how things are changing as they move along. So kind of great to be able to provide that. So that's awesome. Although I did see Guap's comment about missing your daily ramblings as well. I do miss, I think, the puns of the newsletter titles, but that's okay. I think you can include them on your own, which is fine. But appreciate you checking in. I think we're going to continue to kind of, get a sense of where things are. I know it's still very kind of hold and wait. But again, I think great to hear that there is a lot of confidence in terms of the tracks being laid, and hopefully we can kind of skate along on them. So I think with all that said, Todd, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Everyone out there, thanks for your comments, your questions. Really appreciate it as well. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.